as it should be. Not what the world says, but what God says. The principles that God has laid out in His Word for you and I to live. I think Jesus said it the best way. In John chapter 10, verse 10. He says, I've come to give you life and life more abundantly. And so this morning, I want to get into these principles and this power of praise and worship. Because how many know that many Christians, we were all told to praise and worship, but we were never given the principle behind praise and worship. We were never told the power that is set behind praise and worship. And because of that, many of us, we come to church and we go through the motions of praising and worshiping and not understanding the principle and the power that is behind praise and worship. You know, we use in the church, many times people come to church and they use, they miss the worship part of the church because they think that's not the important part of the church. I've come to hear the word. Well, I'm here to tell you this morning that praise and worship may be even more important than the word. But you've got to understand the principle behind something. Because if you don't understand the principle of the way it operates or why it operates, you and I will never understand how praise and worship works. Because it's a powerful force. You heard Pastor Gill turn around and say the fact that, Pastor Sam was prayed for his job and things happened. But there's a power in praise that many of us don't understand. In fact, if you look throughout the Word, when the Israelites or Israel went into battle, they didn't send the spear throwers. They didn't send the guys with the bows and arrows. They didn't send the men with swords first. They sent the praise and worshipers first. Because when praise and worship is understood, when praise and worship is understood how to do it and the principle behind praise and worship, it literally shakes hell itself. Yeah. And we need to understand that this morning if we're going to go anywhere in God, if we're ever going to exceed in the things of God. We need to understand this morning the power that's in worship and praise and the principles that are behind that. So if you have a pen and paper, we're going to show you some things this morning that we hope will start you into this teaching. We're not going to just start it and end it today. It's probably going to go for a number of weeks now. Because there's importance. We want to go slow and make sure that each and every one of us understand the awesomeness that's found in praise and worship. So with that said, Dan, can you hit the next slide? Get it? Any day, man. We just practice this right through. It's got to move. The reason why it's not moving, all right, shut it off and put it on again. I'll write it down as, why is principles so important in the Word? Why is principles so important in the Word? Number one, God is a God of principles. Hey, we got it. God is a God of principles. Everything He created, everything that He made with His hands was established to operate by certain principles. In other words, if you put a seed, in the seed is programmed the principle to grow. And when you put that seed, the principle, into the ground, it will grow and become a tree. Everything that He created contains a principle. And the reason why it contains that principle, because it guarantees its proper function. That's how you know that the seed, when you put it in the ground, is going to function correctly. Why? Because it's got a principle behind it. What's the principle? Put the seed in the ground, and it'll grow. How many know if you don't put the seed in the ground, it's not growing? But everything God created. He created animals with principles. He created everything. He created you and I because He is a God of principles. Turn to Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. You can go to number 2 then. Get it. It froze again. Hello. Thank you. You and I were created to operate. Go ahead. Hit it again. I'm going to throw something up there. By principles. Why? Well, look at Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. He says, and God said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creepy thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in His own image. So if God is a God of principles, then He's made you and I to be a creation of principles. We operate by what? Principles. You must understand that this is definitely important to understand, because if you don't understand the principle of the thing, you'll never understand why it works. Now, principles are found throughout all of the Bible. Every place you look, there are principles. But they're said in different ways. Let me give you some terms that are used for principles. Number 1, law. Number 2,